Hey, Hacksters, good morning. With me today is our latest Arm Innovator, Chelsea Klukas, who is the co-founder at Make Fashion and a product design manager. Good morning, Chelsea. How are you?
Good morning. How are you? Great.
I'm pretty marvelous. Could you tell us a bit about what Make Fashion is?
Yeah, so Make Fashion is a wearable technology organization, and we put high fashion and technology on the runway. So we've been around for over 6 years now. Time goes fast.
Woo!
We were founded in Calgary, Canada, and we've produced over 100 garments and I think pretty close to 100 wearable technology runway shows in that time.
That is quite an output. Wow. So looking at you're 6 years old, which means that you've been sort of around during this whole boom of wearable technology. Looking at the sort of current market, how is tech incorporated into clothing and fashion design? And like how accessible are these things to the general public? Do they only exist on runways or
Yeah, so the most mainstream form of wearable tech is currently seen in accessories, so predominantly on the wrist, like watches, fitness trackers, etc.
Mhm.
So in that sense, wearable tech has become extremely mainstream, but we haven't seen a lot of traction with other forms of wearables. But I've been excited to see a lot more fashion-forward wearables more recently, for women, including like necklaces and hearables, which are earrings that can whisper in your ear or even contain a microphone for like a full voice input.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, you're talking about the periphery one?
yeah, yeah,
That one's crazy.
yeah. And I think like voice in particular is super interesting, like, Alexa, because hearables are really promising in that voice can be this fully functional interface.
Mm.
But garment wearables like full body outfits, I think those are going to be the slowest to become mainstream because there's a lot more challenges over accessories. Like cleaning, and you don't repeat outfits as often. So
Right.
they're going to be a little bit slower to pick up.
So maybe ones like the Levi's and Google Jacquard jacket would be more accessible because you can sort of wear a jacket every day, right? And no one really gives you the side eye, but still you kind of have to wash
Yeah,
it. It's like denim and stuff, right?
exactly. Yeah, yeah. So jackets might be, there's also this like uniform fashion movement. I don't know if you've seen this, which is all
Huh.
about the philosophy of like wearing the same outfit every day, sort of like the Steve Jobs thing.
Right.
That might lead to more garment wearables. I think there's still the question of how you wash it and that sort of thing.
Yeah, maybe lots of detachables and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So you work to bring sort of data-driven technology to design culture, sort of melding the two cultures, which are both very well established, but don't necessarily have a lot of crosstalk. So how do you see this sort of intersection happening? Is it like where things become mobile, personal, or low power, security? I don't know.
Yeah, so I mean, data is now an integral part of the overall design culture. If you look at how the careers of designers have evolved, a few generations ago, designers were working in print and the technology was analog tools like printing press. Then computers came along and
Huh.
then web and mobile, etc. So today, a lot of designers, product designers are dealing with data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning sort of every day. So I believe that an understanding of those technologies is just important to designers as other tools of the craft, like Photoshop or sewing or Arduino.
Mm.
But I still think the best of that in fashion is still to come. Fashion is very fast moving and trend based, but as a whole, the industry has been a little bit slower to evolve. So I think it's still going to be a few years before we really see the full potential of that all coming into the fashion and wearable space.
Wow, cool. Yeah. And a lot of that, I think, the fortunate thing is that you have your phone on you all the time. So if you're trying to do stuff like AI and machine learning, which I hadn't even thought of in like the sphere of wearables, that sounds like it's going to be incredible. But probably a lot of that is still going to be sort of tethered to your phone and stuff for a while.
Yeah, it may be, but the technology is evolving really rapidly. So we could see, some of these smaller processors be able to handle a lot more. So
Mm,
there, I think in the near future, you won't always have to have your phone with you at all times.
that'd be nice. Or at least we can get pockets. Like that's the technology I'm still waiting on. But
Yeah, yeah. It's like if you have a dress with pockets, everyone's like, nice dress. And you're like, it has
it
pockets.
has pockets. Yeah,
That's
totally.
another good thing about sewing is you can just put pockets into everything. So that's a good life hack.
You have superpowers. Whoa. So, yeah, there are some existing implementations of this out there. What sort of are your favorite ones that you've seen? Like, what inspires you in your own designs?
I mean, for me, some of the inspiration starts with an idea. So, either from art or fashion or, the world around me.
Mm,
And some of it is actually inspired by the technology. I'll often see technology that's used for one purpose, and that'll sort of spark ideas for how it could be adapted into something more creative or interesting.
Right.
So in a lot of ways, the understanding of the technology is the key to be able to realize inspirations. Like anyone can have a crazy idea like, oh, a dress that does video, but if you don't actually have an understanding of the technology that'll get you there, those ideas can
Yeah.
kind of fizzle out and just be, just be a cool idea that sort of lives and dies. So that's why I think it's really important for anyone working at the intersection of creativity and technology to really have an understanding and a curiosity towards that technology and almost a fearlessness towards it, because otherwise it's really easy to be intimidated by things you don't understand or to like tell yourself that it's too advanced to master. We see this with a lot of, designers who ask me and other members of our team about fashion and technology, and they're like, oh, it seems really hard, like coding seems really hard, I don't know if I can do it. And it's like, you know what, it's not that hard, you can learn it, you just have to approach it the way you would anything new. And I think sewing and coding are both hard, and if you can do one, you can do the other.
Cool. And yeah, you mentioned putting video on a dress, and like obviously there are a few different ways to do this, and you came up with one that I've never seen anyone else do. Why did you choose to go with a projector mounted in a hat?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start. I have a little video that I'll
Oh,
share
sure, yeah.
to show you a little bit of a demo of what the projector hat is. And it's essentially, as you described, it's a projection. It's a projector in a hat that shines down onto the model and allows for videos to be displayed on dresses. So I'll just share this screen with you right now.
Cool.
A quick little video of that. Can you see that?
Yeah, that looks awesome. That is so cool. And I noticed that one of the models was talking there. Was she sort of explaining what the technology does to the public?
Yeah, well, we sometimes we do a few different ways of displaying it. Sometimes we'll do runway shows and we'll have like a voiceover on the runway or like a little video that explains the technology. And then sometimes we'll do live demos. I think in that video she was actually like chatting with the photographer as we were taking videos of her.
Mm.
Yeah, so that one, was we sort of had the concept to do projection mapping, and my partner Chris Corner and we sort of had this idea. I always wanted to do a projection mapped dress, but and those have kind of there are existing projection map dresses, but the challenges with those is that it's often there's a projector and then there's the model, and the model still. So we had this idea to do it, and then eventually we just kind of came up with this concept of like, oh, like what if the projector was in the hat shining down? So there have been a few evolutions of that dress. So it's been really fun to evolve it, and the most recent version actually has a camera in the hat that's live tracking onto the model.
Oh, wow.
So what that means is that she can move her head or move her body, and there's a full PC in the hat, and it's actually mapping to her body in real time.
Wow. That's so cool. And the fact that you put all the electronics in the hat has got to be really freeing in terms of the design of the garments too. And
so there's kind of this hardware, and then you can do like any kind of dress, or you can use it with like a t-shirt if you wanted to.
That's so cool. And then you don't have to wear like batteries and circuit boards and stuff all over your body and route them and stuff.
Yeah.
Any other like surprising bonuses from this technology?
I think it's one of those things that we like sort of started with, this sort of runway novelty idea, but I think there could be some interesting real world use cases for this kind of technology. So augmented reality is one opportunity. So, augmented reality is currently phones, like Pokemon Go, where you see the creatures through your phone, or like Snapchat filters. But right now, these are all through the lens of usually your phone's camera. But with portable projection system, you could actually view these projected onto the real world. And unlike your phone, other people could also see it. So you could either reverse the projector or add another projector, and then you could be like projecting things onto the world in front of you and have those like science fiction interfaces where there's like the screens and stuff.
Yes. It kind of reminds me of some of those videos we've seen where people are projecting on people's faces different types of makeup and like masks and things so that they look like animals or whatever. There's so much
Yeah.
possibility there.
Yeah, and that's also. I was just in Toronto for the FITC conference, and there was another maker there who had done this like live body painting, and we were chatting about like what if this was in the hat and like right on the body. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to keep expanding the technology and doing more things with it.
That's so cool. So you don't just work with building like one-off sort of fashion pieces. You also help teams, like for example, on the Amazon Echo Look, you work with teams that are developing like full pieces of technology as well. What's sort of the difference in your design process, whether you're building sort of like a one-off dress versus an entire product line with like a team?
Yeah, so with with product design, you're starting with very real human problems and you're coming up with ways to solve those problems. So
Mm,
at Amazon, they call this process working backwards, with the idea that you start with the
mm,
customer problem and then you work backwards from that. And with a lot of the work that I do, like the more creative work with wearable technology, it's almost the reverse. You come up with the
mm.
concept first, and then the path to make that concept a reality are actually the problems that you solve. So you could say that with product design and UX, you're solving problems, and with like art, you're creating your own problems, but like in the best possible way, of course. And the joy of doing that is the freedom from constraints or the business or the need to have to answer to everyone. But of course, there are also wearable technology designs that are solving specific problems and
Mm.
our approach from that product design perspective.
And that also means that you're solving, like creating new solutions as well. Because if you're creating, like, if you have this concept and you're like, how in the world can we create, like, make this happen? Like, you invented this whole thing of like putting a projector in a hat. Like, no one had done that before. So now future people, maybe there's like, problems that Amazon has that will be solved that way. I don't know. Uh,
Yeah, and I think that's also the importance in any business environment, that importance of the idea of creative play, because I
mm.
think a lot of really great things happen when you're not super constrained with thinking about like the business. And sometimes these things come out of brainstorms or creative sessions that are actually really useful and then can be applied to other problems.
Mm. So what was it like? You did all this hacking on this projector to get it small and lightweight enough, and like counterbalancing it with a battery pack and stuff to make sure that it would work. How did you do that hardware hacking, and how was that experience for you?
Yeah, so I worked with my boyfriend Chris Corner. So we worked on it together, and there were a lot of iterations. Actually, you can in that little video there was a short snippet. You can see the first iteration was this cake pan,
Yeah.
because we were trying to figure out how to like get the projector really solid, and we had these like sticks coming off, and it just was like wobbly. So we actually found this cake pan and like cut a hole out of it and made this like cake pan helmet.
That's amazing.
So it was super super hacky, and then we had all these like terrible ways of solving it, like a foil hat and lots of moments of like how are we going to get this to work. And then we eventually arrived in a solution which had actually the original hat still had pieces of a cake pan in it, because it ended up lightweight, like, and we were like, well, we could reproduce, or we could just use the cake pan.
Yeah, it's probably aluminum, super lightweight.
Yeah, yeah, and I, like the little store up the street, we bought like 4 cake pans, and they were like, wow, you guys are doing a lot of baking. So it was, I think it's like really fun to be able to hack and like try different ways of solving the problem. And then the next version, we refined it more. Like the first hat was pretty janky because like I'd never made a hat before, but then
Mm.
doing it over and over again, we've gotten better and better. And like now I can kind of make a hat in 20 minutes.
Mm.
So it's really fun to go through that process and keep evolving and keep making it better and better.
That's so inspiring. And yeah, so you're kind of bringing this experience to other people as well with Stitch Kit. Could you tell us what that is and how people are using it?
Yeah, so the Stitch Kit is a wearable technology board that was created by our Make Fashion co-founders. I actually have a little demo here.
Oh, cool.
You can see it here. So it's this little board. And this was really just made, super customized for wearable technology. After doing this for a few years, we'd, been through the pros and cons of a lot of different boards, and
Mm.
we really had a good sense of what our designers wanted. So it's Arduino based, and here there's just a little. It's on demo mode, but you could also use like an LED strip with it.
Mm.
And so it's super versatile, and just totally designed for fashion technology, which is something that there isn't a lot of out there right now.
Mm.
So yeah, and then also the team has been developing sort of additional add-ons like sewable LED strips and like fiber optic diffusers.
Oh,
So the team has been making more, as we do more and more garments and more shows, there's these things that we continue to be hacking, and then like actually being able to take these hacky solutions and make a custom solution for it has been really interesting.
that's awesome. How do you make an LED strip sewable?
So I haven't actually seen it yet, but it's so rather than just the like straight LED strips, sometimes they're like sticky on the back. There's just little holes on the side that you can stitch through.
Oh, cool. So
So
you're
yeah,
not like afraid that you're going to be like piercing through something super essential.
yeah, which I've done before.
Totally. And plus, like you've also got, I noticed on the board you have these holes that you weave the wires through for strain relief, which is really cool. Like that's a huge thing in wearables as well, is like, keeping something so that the wires and the connections don't just break as they're flexed constantly.
Yeah, and then even on this, there's like the little holes in that you might not be able to see, but there's
Oh,
little holes on
cool.
the edge there. Yeah, because it's also like even something simple like sewing, like these kinds of LED strips, they often have this sticky stuff on the back, but that doesn't really
Yeah.
work, and you're kind of like trying to loop it around or doing all these hacky solutions or trying to poke through it and hoping that you don't technology. So it's these like super small things that just make things a lot easier for the next generation of fashion tech designers.
Cool. And you're sort of leading by creating the tools that people can use. Like I had a question here. It's like, what challenges you, okay, I'll just ask you,
Yeah.
what challenges do you have when you're like trying to shape the future? And, obviously you're leading partly by creating these tools for people, like shaping their processes to help make them better and faster and more efficient. And, but also do you educate designers on data or on methods or,
Yeah, so a big part of what Make Fashion is now is a lot of, hands-on mentorship and a lot of workshops. We've also been really invested in trying to get the younger generation, particularly girls, interested in, engineering and technology through fashion, because I think, a lot of people, a lot of girls in particular are interested in fashion. So it's a great gateway to get them kind of hooked on maker culture and technology. So that's a big part of what we've been doing as Make Fashion. And even from day one, we did these presentations with designers, and I just remember we did this presentation where we showed a lot of, there weren't that many out there, but a lot of the capabilities of what fashion and technology could be. And everyone's eyes just like got giant, and they were like, oh my God, there's so much I could do. So it was super cool, and I think that continues. But the great thing is that now there's more and more examples of this. And actually, I was just at the conference, and there were all these students, and I wore this light up outfit, and these students were like, yeah, so
yeah,
for
I
a
was
school
noticing
project, you
you.
have to do like wearable technology, and I was like, that's so cool that that's a school project now.
Yeah. I love that moment that you get when you start like you tell people about the technology and then they suddenly like oh and I could do like all this other stuff like where you get that kind of snowball effect of excitement and inspiration.
And
Super good.
it's also cool too because by the way the technology is evolving so fast. Like for example, the projectors and the projection hat, like every year they're cheaper and smaller and lighter. And you finish one project and then you see that there's like a better version of the technology. So you're
Yeah.
really done because anytime you think you're done, there's like a new better thing out there, and you're like, oh, but I could make it this much better. So it's really really addicting. So be careful if you like get into this because you'll never stop.
Oh my. Oh no, totally. Speaking of do you want to share anything about the outfit you're wearing or the one on the dress form behind you or?
Yeah, so this is just this one doesn't have the stitch kit, but it's the nice thing about a lot of our garments is that you can just like plug in any board.
Mm.
So this one, I'll just brighten it up. I dimmed it because the reflection was kind of. So yeah, this is one that has LED strips, so it's just basically like one of these strips with a board in it. And then the one in the back is just a white light dress. This one in the back is I'm trying to do a few more things that are a little bit more practical for like things that people would wear as opposed to the runway kind of stuff. And this is
Oh
an
yeah.
example of that. So yeah, it's fun to make this stuff. It's always fun to like wear stuff like this when you go out, and it's a great conversation starter. So if you're like a little
Totally.
shy at starting conversations, like this is a great way to have those conversations.
I use my hair that way.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really easy.
Right. I think I read that in some like art of conversation that you want to have like one thing that stands out. So like this really, really does it.
Yeah, totally. Do you feel like people still want to talk to you about you? I bet you're
Yeah,
fascinating.
it's people start talking about it, and then it's like, oh, what do you do? And then you start
Plus, like
talking.
you made it.
Yeah, it's like I made it. So yeah, and it's also, especially around creative people, because it's also, interesting because a lot of people are doing projects. I think now that maker culture has really taken off, like so many people have these projects they're doing. So it's a great way to start those conversations around other interesting creative projects that people are doing.
Totally. And plus, like, it says a lot about you as a person. Like it's sort of a "this is who I am" kind of statement that really gives people like the chance to be like, "Oh, I want to check that out."
Yeah, yeah.
You mentioned that you're making, with the dress in the back, you're making it more sort of practical for everyday wear. What kind of stuff that do you do? Is like battery pack management or what?
Yeah, so battery pack is like a huge part of that. So there's a few different ways that you can manage that. So you really have to start designing, thinking about where the battery pack is going to go, because if you think about it at the end and you make, like a skin tight dress and you have this big battery pack,
Yeah.
that's obviously not good. The other big factor to consider is how you're going to wash it, because
Mm,
even with dry cleaning, you really don't want to be putting these components in the wash. So
mm.
one easy way to tackle that is just to have like a slip, like a laundry layer underneath. Um,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, so for a lot of our runway shows, like we'll just have, like for this one, we'll always just have a white slip underneath, so then you can wash that and then just pray that you don't like spill anything on the outside of the dress, because then you don't really have a good solution for that.
Yeah, that's really cool. So our friend Rex has popped in to ask, are there any new materials coming out, such as flexible or transparent electronics, do you think have high potential for new designs?
Yeah, totally. I have seen a lot of those, like, flexible screens and bendable screens.
Oh,
Actually,
yeah.
there've been versions of them around for a couple years, but they've all been like super beta. Um,
Mhm.
so I think, as soon as those become accessible, it'll be really, really interesting to start playing around with some of the technology. Some of the stuff we've looked into ends up, because it is in that prototype stage, being like super expensive. And
Yeah.
when you're doing this kind of stuff, you end up breaking a lot of things. So um, sells a little bit cheaper. And then, yeah, I'm really excited about that. And, there are a lot of researchers looking at, smart fabrics in different ways that, fabrics can be incorporated, which I also think is really, really interesting and something that I personally haven't explored a lot.
Mm. Yeah, and I've heard that there's like flexible batteries even that they're developing, which sounds pretty excellent. Like as long as it can like withstand being flexed back and forth a bit. But yeah, the sort of oh man, the integrated sort of technology into the textile itself is such a sort of really cool ground that's being advanced right now. It's so exciting.
Yeah, yeah, completely.
So what other limitations do you see that could be overcome with new tools like this? Like what are your big challenges?
Yeah, so I think, like fashion's interesting because even though we're buying more and more clothing, the DIY element of sewing seems to actually be like falling out of favor. Like it used
Huh,
to be pretty normal for everyone to sew and make your own clothes. Like a lot of us have like grandmas who would sew for us. But
right.
I think with fast fashion now, like we've kind of gone the other direction where it's so easy to just buy something off the shelf that it's becoming a bit of a lost art.
Hmm.
So personally, I'd like to see that movement kind of pick up again, in the same way that like the maker movement has been super exciting to see all these people get excited about like making things and
Yeah.
creative in ways that are really interesting and useful. So I think that's one of the limitations right now with a lot of wearable technology. And I think that's sort of limiting innovation in terms of the industry, because a lot of the industry is very set in its ways in terms of how, even just the way clothing is manufactured. Like a lot of the reason that clothing is so expensive and the whole fast fashion movement is that the processes for creating clothing are like so fast and like so hammered down to a T. So
Mm.
there's less appetite for innovation, I think, than in some of the other fields of product design right now.
Mm. I have seen a criticism of fast fashion where people are like, yes, it's fast and like it's pretty cheap and you can get the costs down, but also they're using sort of low quality materials and so things like wear out fast. I kind of wonder if, since the maker movement also has this kind of component of hacking and modifying, if maybe we'll see those sort of come together where people have things that start wearing out and maybe that brings back the kind of mending culture and improving like, oh, while I'm like, I have this jacket that's falling apart, maybe I'll fix it and like put a layer of LEDs or like carbon fiber or something over it. That'd be really cool to see.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And I think there's really something there in terms of that, because again, like if you look at, like my grandmother's generation, if your socks wore out, you just like fix them and you would fix your jeans.
Mm,
And I think now it's more common for us to just like toss it out and get something new.
Yeah.
And I think that the maker culture is really great because it is sort of repurposing and upcycling things. And you know, even like if my clothes wear out, I'll like cut out the zippers and stuff, because as you do
Uh-huh.
this, you realize that like zippers are kind of expensive.
Oh
So
yeah.
I have like, you know, this like bin of all these like destroyed clothing that I take little pieces out of. And I think that would also just be good in terms of sustainability as well, because a lot of the criticisms around fast fashion around sustainability and a lot of the ethics around how this clothing is made. And I
Mm.
think that if fashion had a little bit more of that, you know, attitude of reusing and recycling and creating, it would just be really good overall in terms of, you know, sustainability.
That's really cool. And it's cool that you say that. It reminds me a lot of how hacker spaces will have like an e-waste bin where people just dig through. And you know, in the past as well, when electronic components were more expensive or hard to come by, people would like, you know, look for things at trunk sales and like pull out all the capacitors and transistors and stuff, and then just like keep them in bins for when they needed them. And that's such a like similar thing. Plus at
Yeah.
hackerspaces now, like I think sewing machines are getting more attention, like knitting machines, sewing machines. Textiles are really convenient. Oh, I think that's a really exciting space.
Yeah, I get so excited if I see a sewing machine at a makerspace. I'm like,
Oh
yes.
yeah, totally. So what other atypical sensors and displays do you want to use? You've done the projector, which is incredibly innovative, but without spoiling too much, you know, is there anything else you're excited to get your hands on?
Yeah, you know, a lot of the mainstream wearables are kind of just scratching the surface of how the human body can be used for input and output. You know, a lot of the, you know, consumer wearables are essentially just like small computers strapped onto your body, like a
Mm,
smartwatch. And you can make the argument that smartwatches are like kind of just like a smaller, lighter phone or computer, but there's actually a lot of ways that the human body can have inputs, like
mm,
you know, your pulse sensors, or you know, your full body movements, voice. There's even, you know, the ability to track brain waves, like the
yeah.
headband is something that we've used in some of our runway garments.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah, we've done these some of these dresses that you wear the Muse headband,
Mm.
and the dress responds to it. So
Oh.
as your brain activity is getting stronger, the dress will light up. And so I think there's a lot of practical ways that that could be used also. So I think in the next 5 to 10 years, you know, things like screen interfaces are going to start to be phased out, and we're going to be using some of these other ways of having inputs. And I think that's going to be really exciting to see how wearables are a part of that movement.
Mm. Shannon Hoover asks, can you talk about this? Kind of links into what you were just saying about like, you know, EEG and pulse sensors and things. She says, uh, can you talk about what sensors you find useful for fashion tech, and how do you see sensors changing fashion at large?
Yeah, and you know, there's a lot of you know, sensors that are really easy to use for the kind of DIY stuff. Like the Stitch Kit works with the Grove sensors, so there's a lot of different ones there. I think, you know, in particular, the accelerometers, like the ability to track movement, could be really interesting.
Mm,
You know, once we get to a place, and we are getting there, where they're sensitive enough to be able to really use like true like gesture motions, that'll be really interesting.
yeah.
You know,
I
for
think once you
clothing.
don't have to talk to your wearables, that's going to be really nice.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, like I think we're still a long ways away from like the true like brainwave reading, where like we can actually think and things will happen. Like there
Yeah.
are some you know,
I'm
areas.
kind of glad of that, honestly.
Yeah, I know, right? That could be a little bit concerning. I'd have to get better at like controlling my thoughts.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll never get there. So I think, you know, and for clothing, like temperature sensors are an obvious one, because you know, a lot of
Mm.
the reason you put on layers are because you're too warm or too cold. And even with Make Fashion, we've showcased a few examples of garments that can sort of help you heat up or cool down, and I've seen more and more of those coming into the consumer markets. So I think
Oh,
those are a couple ways that you know, wearables can use sensors in a practical way.
super cool. Our good friend anonymous attendee asks, when is Make Fashion having their next gala?
Yeah, good question. So this year we're doing our gala in collaboration with Beakerhead. So Beakerhead is this
Oh,
really cool,
cool.
yeah, it's this really cool like technology and science festival that's been going on in Calgary for a few years. So it was sort of a natural fit. So it's going to be happening in September, and we're going to be having a call for artists on our website pretty soon. I'm going to be putting that up this week, and then you can learn how to get involved and be a part of that gala.
That's awesome. So it's 11 o'clock. We should probably wrap up pretty quick. Is there anything else you want to throw in there? Any questions that like you're burning to answer but no one asks?
Oh, I don't know. I
Kind of
was
sprung that one on you.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's kind of it for me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been
Yeah.
really fascinating.